Why you must read, beginner level. Why do I need to read in English? My students often ask me this. They think, I go to classes, I do my homework, I watch films in English. Why should I read books? Actually, reading is the best way to improve your English. I will tell you why. First, reading is very important now. In 2006, only 1 in 100 people went to university. Now 7 in 100 people go to university. All jobs need more reading and writing than 100 years ago. This is true for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're an office worker or a mechanic. Second, reading will improve your speaking, writing, vocabulary, and grammar better than any other way. It won't improve your listening, but it will improve your vocabulary. And when you have a better vocabulary, you can listen more easily and improve your listening that way. In school, you probably read lots of English. You probably read boring textbooks and stories with exercises at the end. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about reading for pleasure. That means reading a book you enjoy because you enjoy it. You are not reading because your teacher said, "Read this book." You are not reading because you think, "I should read this book." You are reading because you want to. In 1965, they did an experiment in schools in America. These schools were for boys who had done crimes. For example, some of them stole things. They gave some of the boys free books. They were fun books, like James Bond. They said, "You can do what you want. You don't have to read the books." But the boys did read the books. They read a lot of books. Some boys read a book every 2 days. After 2 years, they gave the students a test. The students who got the books got better at reading and writing, and they liked school more. The students who did not get the books did not get better at reading and writing. Actually, some of them got worse. This isn't just true for native speakers. They also did an experiment on students learning English in the Fiji Islands. They used 3 ways to teach. The first way was normal English teaching. They did grammar classes, exercises, and so on. The second way was reading in silence. The students read books in class. The third way was reading together. The teacher read books to the students. After 1 year, the 2 ways with reading were the best. They were much better than the students who did normal English classes. They did the experiment again in Singapore. There, the students who read in silence did very well. They did the best in grammar tests. Other students did grammar classes, but they did worse in grammar tests. In normal classes, we try to remember grammar and vocabulary. When we read, we learn them naturally. Maybe you're thinking, when I read in English, it's too hard. I have to use the dictionary all the time. It's boring. I can't do it. I understand, so I wrote this book. I think this book will make you like reading because the stories are easy and fun. The early stories are short and easy, and the later stories are longer and harder. When you finish the book, you will think, "Wow, I did it." I make a podcast called English Spoken Stories. 9 of the stories in this book I wrote for English Spoken Stories. One of the stories I wrote for this book. But when I made this book, I made the stories better. Now you can read the stories at beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, or advanced levels. The stories are all fairy tales. Some are very popular fairy tales, but some are not so popular. One of them I wrote myself. Maybe you're thinking, fairy tales? Fairy tales are for children. I need useful vocabulary. I need to learn about business and science. That can't be fun. Actually, the vocabulary in these stories will be useful. McQuillan did an experiment where he looked at vocabulary in 22 novels. 85% of the words were on academic word lists. These are lists of words that you need to know to study at university. Rolls and Rogers also did an experiment. They said, if students read 1 million words of science fiction, will they learn important science words for studying at university? The answer was yes. So yes, fairy tales are useful for you too. But I understand if you still don't believe me. When I learned about all this, I found it hard to believe too. But I like to try new things, and I love learning languages. So in 2017, I decided to do an experiment. I had wanted to learn Spanish for a long time, but I didn't learn much in normal classes. I said, I will read 1 million words in Spanish. Afterwards, I will see what my level is. 1 million words is about 20 novels, so it was a lot of work. I started with very easy reading, like this book. Then I started reading translations of books that I knew in English. For example, I have read Harry Potter and Game of Thrones in English, so I read them in Spanish too. Finally, I read new books in Spanish. I read Latin American authors, that means writers, such as Isabel Allende, Luis Jorge Borges, and Manuel Puig. I love them. I also listened to podcasts, but I always read the transcripts and added the words to my goal. After I finished reading 1 million words, I wrote and talked to native speakers. I was at an intermediate level. I could understand almost everything I read. I could understand people when they spoke clearly, and I could have conversations. And I had spent most my time reading, not speaking. In 1 year, I learned more than most students learn in 5 years. I didn't try to remember grammar and vocabulary. I learned them naturally. Maybe you're thinking, I don't believe this. Or maybe you're thinking, wow, I'm going to read for hours every day. But I have to say something very important. You must read books that are easy. You must read books that are fun. If a book is too difficult or too boring, put it down and find another one. Stephen Krashen, an expert in language teaching, says, only read things in English that are fun and interesting. Read things that are really easy, that you wouldn't read in your native language because they are too easy. So you can read comics, magazines, detective stories, romance stories, and so on. Don't feel bad about reading translations. If you read very easy books, when you see a word you don't know, you will understand the meaning easily. You won't have to use a dictionary, so what is easy? Experiments show that you should understand at least 98% of the words in a text. 98%? That's so high. I know. But let me show you an example. Here is a text where 10% of the words are not real words, so you should understand 90% of the words. Jerry flurged out of bed and opened the curtains. He bimped to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his poffer. Someone called his phone and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was torngling, so his Vinky fell on the floor. Is that easy to understand? Could you read a whole book of that? Here is the same text, but only 2% of the words are not real. So you should understand 98% of the words. Jerry jumped out of bed and opened the curtains. He sang to himself as he made breakfast. He made coffee and put butter on his toast. Someone called his phone and he picked it up. He was very surprised by who was calling, so his Vinky fell on the floor. "How was that?" "You probably didn't understand everything, but it was more fun to read than the first text. That's why reading for pleasure is so great. Maybe you don't understand everything, but you understand enough to follow the story, and you don't have to pick up a dictionary. So if you find that this book is too hard, read something easier. If you find it boring, read something more fun. I know that not everyone likes my writing, and that's okay. Find a book that is good for you. When we have fun, we learn much more. Because I want this book to be fun, it has no exercises in it. I thought about adding them after each story, but I don't think it's a good way to spend your time. Instead, you should read more. Read for pleasure. If you finish this book, you can try the level above. Because you already read the stories, you will know them well, and it will be easier to understand. But maybe when you finish this book, you will love stories. I hope so. If you do want to read more, you can listen to my podcast, English Spoken Stories. I write a new story every week, with audio and text, and there are over 100 episodes for you to listen to. Happy reading and happy learning. Why you must read, intermediate level. Why do I need to read in English? I get this question a lot from students. They argue that as long as they're going to classes, doing their homework and watching films in English, there's no need to sit down with something as boring and old-fashioned as a book. Well, to put it simply, they're wrong. In fact, reading is the best thing you can do to learn English, and I'm here to tell you why. Firstly, reading skills are more important than ever, whether that be in English or your native language. In 2006, only 1 in 100 people went to university. Now it's 7 in 100. All jobs, from office workers to mechanics, require far more reading and writing than a century ago. The competition is higher, and readers win. Secondly, reading is the best way to improve proficiency in English overall. Yes, you heard me right. Reading will improve your speaking, writing, vocabulary, and grammar far more efficiently than any other method. It won't improve your listening skills, but it will give you the vocabulary necessary to train your ear quickly. But it's not just any reading we're talking about. In school, you probably read lots in English. Boring textbooks and stories with exercises at the end. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about reading for pleasure. That means reading a book because you enjoy it. Not because your teacher told you to. Not because it's what you're supposed to read to improve your English. No questions, no book reports, just pure pleasure. Yeah, right. You're probably thinking, that's too good to be true. Let me show you. In 1965, an experiment was carried out in juvenile delinquent reform centers in America. One group of the students were given free books. They made sure they were exciting books that would appeal to young boys, such as James Bond. But unlike most reading programs, they were not required to read the books. They were simply given them. They could throw the books away, give them back, or draw on the pages, and nobody would punish them for it. But the boys did read them. They read a lot of them. Some of them read a book every 2 days. At the end of 2 years, they tested the students. Not only did their reading and writing greatly improve, so did their attitude towards school.
But the students who were not on this program stayed the same. In fact, some of them got worse over the 2 years. This isn't just for native speakers either. A study of English as a second language, ESL students in the Fiji Islands, looked at 3 methods: traditional English teaching, sustained silent reading, which means reading in silence for a long time, and a more conventional reading program where the teachers read aloud to the students. By the end of the first year, students taught with the 2 reading methods had a 15-month advantage in English ability compared to the 6.5 months of the traditional method. When the study was replicated in Singapore, the students who did only sustained silent reading did better on grammar tests than the students who had taken only grammar classes. When we do grammar exercises, we try to memorize the rules of the language. When we read, we absorb them. But I know what you're thinking. That's all well and good, but when I pick up a book in English, it's too hard for me. I get bored of looking up words and I give up after a few minutes. That's why I wrote this book. It is designed to make you fall in love with reading by providing fun, familiar stories that are easy to understand. The stories gradually increase in difficulty and length, so that you can feel a sense of progression and success at the end. Most of them were originally released on my podcast, English Spoken Stories, but they have been rewritten and improved for this book, as well as having a version for each language level. They are a mix of classic and less popular fairy tales, as well as one that I wrote myself. Again, I know what you're thinking. Fairy tales? But those are for kids. I need useful vocabulary about business and science and technology. There's no way to make that fun. The thing with language is there isn't such a big difference between important language and fun language. We use a wide range of words when talking about technical topics, as well as chatting with our friends. A study by McQuillan examined vocabulary in 22 novels and found that they included 85% of words on academic word lists. Rolls and Rogers found that if a student read 1 million words of science fiction, they would acquire many of the technical words required for a science degree. So yes, reading fairy tales will help your English in all areas, even for academic purposes. As an English teacher, I've seen many times that the students who do the best are those who read the most. For IELTS, for university, for business, or just for travel, reading is the factor that predicts success. But I understand if you're still unsure. When I learned about all this, I was too. But I like to experiment, and I have a passion for learning languages. So in 2017, I had wanted to learn Spanish for a long time, but aside from struggling with Duolingo and not really learning anything, I hadn't made a serious attempt. I set myself a goal. I would read 1 million words in Spanish and see what my level was afterwards. 1 million words is roughly 20 standard-length novels, so it was a huge task. I started with very easy resources, like transcripts of podcasts for learners, but I avoided anything that felt too much like work. Once I'd learned the basics, I started reading translations of books that I knew in English, such as Harry Potter and A Song of Ice and Fire.
You might know it as Game of Thrones. Finally, I was ready to move on to completely new books, and I fell in love with Latin American authors such as Isabel Allende, Luis Jorge Borges, and Manuel Puig. With the reading, I also listened to podcasts, but I always read the transcripts and counted the words as part of my reading. After I achieved my goal, I tested myself by writing and talking to native speakers and found I was at a decent intermediate level. I could understand almost everything I read, understand clear speech, and have conversations at a comfortable level, even though I had barely spoken the language since I started learning. I had been learning for about a year, and I had made more progress than most students make in 5 years. I didn't memorize the vocabulary and grammar rules. I absorbed them. By this point, you're either thinking, this is all complete nonsense, or you're super excited, ready to start reading for hours a day. But the next thing I'm going to say is extremely important. You must read books that are easy. You must read books that are fun. If a book is too difficult or too boring, put it down and find another one. Stephen Krashen, an expert in the field of second language acquisition, says, "Read only material in the second language that is genuinely fun and interesting, material that is so easy that you probably feel guilty reading it in your primary language. This is your excuse to read comics, magazines, detective stories, romances, etc. There is no shame in reading translations. Ideally, you want to be reading a book so easy that, when you see a word you don't know, you can understand the meaning from context. Research has shown that in order for this to happen, the text needs to be at least 98% known words. 98%? That's so high. I know, dear reader, but let me show you an example. Here's a text where I've replaced 10% of the words with nonsense words. That is, it's 90% comprehensible. Jerry flurged out of bed and threw open the curtains. It was a beautiful day. He bimped to himself as he did his daily routine, pouring coffee and buttering poffer. But then his phone rang, and the person torngling was so unexpected that he dropped his Vinky on the floor. Is that easy to understand? Could you read a whole book of that? Here's the same text, but 98% comprehensible. Jerry jumped out of bed and threw open the curtains. It was a beautiful day. He sang to himself as he did his daily routine, pouring coffee and buttering toast. But then his phone rang, and the person calling was so unexpected that he dropped his Vinky on the floor. How was that? Even if you couldn't understand everything, I bet it was far more enjoyable to read than the first text. And that's the magic of reading for pleasure. Even if you didn't understand everything, you got enough to follow the story and keep going without having to pick up a dictionary. So if you find that this book is too hard, put it down and read the level below. If you find it boring, go read something else. Yes, I'm giving you permission to stop reading my book. I know not everyone likes my writing style, and that's okay. Find what works for you. As you read, focus on the meaning of the stories, and don't sweat it if you don't understand every single word. Just relax and try to get lost in the pages. Believe it or not, when we have fun, we learn far better. The levels of these volumes are based on the Common European Framework of Reference, a system for defining language levels. You'll know them as A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2, although these books only cover A2, C1. If you're A1 level, you probably need more guided teaching before you start reading, and if you're C2 level, then you can start reading books for native speakers. A great strategy, if you don't feel so confident about your reading ability, is to start with the beginner level of the book and reread it level by level, going all the way up to advanced. This will allow you to really absorb the new language and gradually increase the difficulty. There is not a huge difference between the intermediate level stories and the advanced level stories, but even rereading the same story twice can be very effective. We need to repeatedly encounter new words and phrases before our brain can really understand them. Finally, this book has no exercises in it. I considered adding them after each story, but it would contradict everything I just told you. The most effective way to spend your time is reading for pleasure, and exercises distract from that. If, however, you finish this book and find yourself wanting more stories, do go and listen to my podcast, English Spoken Stories. I publish a new story every week with audio and text, and there are over 100 episodes for you to listen through. Happy reading and happy learning. How to remember words. On Wednesday, I go to school again. At the beginning of the lesson, one student says, "I started to read more. I feel that it is good for me. I can see how my grammar is better, but I have a problem. When I read, I look up a new word in a dictionary. Then I continue reading. Sometimes when I see the same word again only 10 minutes later, I don't remember the word and I have to look it up again. Can you help me to remember the words better?" Our teacher says that it is an interesting question and she gives this explanation. It is absolutely normal that you don't remember the new word immediately. Usually you will have to look up the word 5 times before you remember it. There will be also words that you will have to look up 10 or 15 times. These words are usually verbs. When we learn a new word, the word goes through phases. Only when you achieve the last phase, you remember the word very well. There are 5 of these phases. Let's have a look at them. The first phase is the moment when you see the word for the first time and you don't know the word. You look it up in the dictionary. The second phase is the moment when you see the word that you have already looked up in the dictionary, or heard or saw it in the past. You know that you saw this word before, but you still don't remember its meaning. You look up the word again. The third phase is the moment when you see the word again, and you feel what it could mean, but you're not sure. For example, you know that the word is some kind of object, or some animal, or a verb. The fourth phase is the moment when you already know what the word means when you see it, but you are not able to recall the word when you want to say it. When this phase happens, the word is in your passive vocabulary. The fifth phase is the moment when you are able to use the word when you speak. Now you can see there are 5 phases altogether. Do you understand now why it is not possible to remember a new word when you see it for the first time? You would have to jump across all the phases with the first encounter with the word. You have to see or hear every word several times and let it go through all the phases until you get to phase number 5. You can be happy not only when you learn a new word perfectly, but also when you get from one phase to the other. When it happens, you are closer to the final goal, and it is to use the word without problems in everyday communication. All of this is interesting to me. I didn't know about these phases, but it is all logical. It also happened to me that I looked up a new word in the dictionary, but 2 minutes later I didn't know what the word was, and I had to look it up again. I felt stupid that I didn't remember the word. Now I know that it is absolutely okay not to remember the word forever when I see it for the first time. I need several encounters with the word before I can use the word well. After school, I go to my football training. Our coach tells us that there will be a match on Saturday. The school team will play against another school team from Cambridge. Our coach tells me to come and play for the school team. I am very happy, and I am looking forward to the Saturday match. When you want to remember a new word, you need to see or hear the word about 10 times. How to improve listening. The next day, I go to school again. One of the students has an important question. He wants to know how to improve his listening skills. He wants to know what the best approach is. Our teacher says, "Thank you for your question. Good listening skills are very important for communication. If you don't understand what people are saying, it will be difficult for you to speak with them." There are a lot of materials on the internet for students of English. Some students can have a problem with finding the right listening materials for them. Let's have a look at what you should listen to. There are 2 types of materials which you can listen to. You can listen to some audio or you can watch a film. These are quite different materials and different rules apply to them. When you listen to some audio, you should know 95% of the words or more. If the audio has a lot of new words, read the text first if possible, and make sure you know all the words. When you practice listening, you practice getting information from a spoken language. You don't try to learn new words. Of course, sometimes you can learn new words, but it is not the main goal. When you listen, concentrate on getting information from spoken English. It is important to use materials at your level of English. For example, you can use books in simplified English which contain an audio recording. I really recommend these books to you. They are fantastic because you can choose a book at your level of English. When you have such a book, read the book first and then listen to the recording at home or when you travel. You can read 2 great books at www.robinsonCrusoeinlevels.com or www.thelittleprinceinlevels.com. You can also visit www.newsinlevels.com if you like listening to the news. All these materials are in 3 levels of English. The second type of materials for listening practice are films and videos on www.youtube.com. These are also great. You can start using them when you know 2,000 words in English or more. This is what you should do with a film. Watch it for the first time with subtitles so that you know what the film is about. Then watch the film without subtitles. If you like the film very much, you can watch it more than once. When you watch one film many times with every view, you will understand more. It is also good to watch videos on the internet about interesting subjects. For example, if you like nature, you can watch documentaries about nature. You can also watch reality shows. Reality shows are much easier to understand than films or documentaries, because the structure of the show is usually the same. It is necessary to have at least 30 minutes a day of listening. The more you listen, the faster you will understand more words. When listening, you should always look at what you already understand, even if it is just 10% at the beginning. It is very easy to demotivate yourself by realizing all of the parts that you don't understand yet. Look at what you already know. Be happy for every new sentence you have understood. Listening is the easiest way to learn. You don't have to do anything. You just listen. Did this information help you? Yes, says the student. Thank you. The listening topic is very interesting for me. Now I know what to do to improve my listening. When you want to be good at listening, listen for 30 minutes every day. What you need. Before you start on Friday, we have an interesting conversation in our class. Our teacher has a question for us. She asks, "What was your first reason to learn English? Do you remember the moment when you started to learn English? When did you start to be really interested in the language?" I say that I remember the moment when I started to be interested in English. My teacher says, "Can you tell us what happened?" I say, "Yes." First, I have to say that English wasn't always my favorite subject. I started to learn English at high school. At the beginning, it was very difficult for me. I didn't understand the structure of the language. It was illogical to me. I tried to remember words. I tried to learn grammar, but it was very hard. When I finished high school, I was still only a beginner. I couldn't speak English, and I believed that I would never learn this language properly. I simply believed that English wasn't for me. Then something happened. I always liked music, and when I was 20, I started to listen to the Beatles. I wanted to understand what they were singing, so I started to translate their songs. Slowly, I understood more and more. Then I met two ladies from England on a train. We had a simple conversation, but it helped me very much. I started to believe that I could learn English. From that moment on, I was working on my English almost every day, and I was getting better and better. Then I decided to go to England and improve English here. My teacher thanks me for sharing my story. She also tells me, "Here is something very interesting about your story. You are still you. The first, you didn't have motivation to learn English. The second, you had a motivation. You wanted to understand songs. You can see that motivation is very important. When you have it, you can succeed. When you don't have it, it is very hard to be successful." Then our teacher asks everybody in the class about their motivation to learn English. The stories are very interesting. One girl's motivation is to be able to read historical books in original English. One student wants to be a professional tennis coach in England. He wants to speak perfect English before he starts his career as a coach. One woman wants to work for a big international company, and she needs English for her job. I can see that everybody has some kind of motivation to use English in real life or to get information from books. At the end of the lesson, our teacher asks us if we like English. I say, I didn't like English at my high school, but now I like it a lot. I can see how useful it is to know this language. Our teacher says, "This is another important factor when you learn a new language. It is good when you like something which is connected to English. It can be people, music, culture, or history. If you like English, it is easier for you to learn it. If you want to be able to communicate in English, it is good to know 3,000 words or more. If you don't like English, it is more difficult to find time to practice enough to get to the level of 3,000 words. I can agree with my teacher. Now, I like not only the Beatles, but also my teacher and my boss, who is also English. I also like English humor. Now it is much easier for me to find time to practice English every day. On Saturday, I go to play football for my school team. We have some very good players on our team and we win 3-2. We are all very happy. We go to the pub after the match and we celebrate our victory. When you want to learn English, you need to have motivation to use English every day. How to learn 3,000 words. During the next lesson, one of the students asks our teacher this question. You told us that it is good to know 3,000 words. Where can I find these 3,000 words that are the most important for me to learn? My teacher replies, you can Google a list of the 3,000 most frequent words in English, but such a list will not help you much. When you start to learn words from this list, you will learn words outside the context. You will learn the words that are not connected with any story. You will not learn what other words are connected with these words in sentences. You will learn them in your short-term memory. This system works only for some words. These are basic words which describe things and people around us. For example, mother, father, apple, blue, orange, dog, cat, book, car, house, city, boy, girl, water, cinema, or paper. These are words which represent something that you can imagine easily. For example, when you learn the word dog, you know immediately what it is. You have a clear idea in your head what the word means. Yet when you want to learn words such as appreciate or suppose, the system doesn't work well. This is a problem many students experience. They start their studying by using lists of words. It works at the beginning, and they believe that they can learn English this way. They don't know that when they achieve the level of 1,000 words, they have to start using a different system. If you want to learn words from a higher level, you have to learn them from whole sentences. If you understand the meaning of a word in the context of a sentence, you will learn the word much better. You can learn words from lists, but there is usually a limit where you can go with this way of learning, and it is 1,000 words. Also, way of learning is very slow. There are much better ways which we have already spoken about, such as reading. For beginners, the best book to read is Robinson Crusoe in Simple English. You can find this book at www.robinsoncrusoeinlevels.com. It is the best book I know of for learning new words for beginners. There is also one interesting rule that applies here. Every word that is important for you will come back to your life again and again until you learn the word. This is very similar to the way we learn your own language. When we are children, we don't study from lists of words. We just use the language, and important words keep coming into our lives again and again until one day we know what the words mean. We keep learning new words this way all our lives. For example, the verb Google is a new word in many languages. We learnt this word by using the language. We didn't learn this word from any list of words. When you heard the word Google for the first time, You probably didn't know what the word meant. Then you heard it again and again, as the word was important for you, and after some time you understood the word. You can forget about lists of words. Learn new words by reading stories and other interesting texts. When you use English a lot every day, you will learn new words more effectively than from lists of words. Does it make sense? Yes, says the student. Thank you. After school, I go to my work. I already understand how to do my work very well. Things start to be automatic. I am happy that I understand my customers. It is not very difficult because the conversations are usually very similar. Our customers want some coffee or sandwiches, so the words are usually the same or very similar. My confidence goes higher, and sometimes I start to have longer conversations with our customers. Everything is good, but then something happens. It is a little bit shocking for me. When you learn a new word, learn it as part of the whole sentence. How to improve your accent. On Tuesday, when I am at my work, something interesting happens. 2 customers come to our cafe. They are a husband and a wife. The man starts to speak to me. I know that he speaks English, but I don't understand him. I don't understand what he wants. I think that he wants something we don't have, so I call my boss. She speaks with the man, and she sells him 2 coffees and 2 of our regular sandwiches. I'm surprised. When they leave, I go to my boss and I tell her that I am sorry I didn't understand the man. She says that it is okay. She says that this can happen when people speak with an accent that is new to us. She tells me that the pair was from Scotland. The next day I go to school and I tell this story to my teacher. I tell her that I felt really stupid that I didn't understand our customer. I wasn't sure if my English was good enough for my job. I started to doubt myself. My boss was okay with it, but I still needed some help from my teacher. I wanted to know what I could do in these situations. My teacher says, I understand. You are used to English that people speak in London, but you aren't used to the Scottish accent. Your ears aren't used to listening to the Scottish accent. All you have to do is to listen more to Scottish English. You need to train your ears to this accent as well. What happened to you can happen to everybody. When you already speak English at some level, and you go to a country where people speak with a different accent, you shouldn't be surprised if you don't understand. It is okay, and it usually takes 2 weeks to get used to this new accent. You shouldn't think that there is something wrong with you when you don't understand a new accent. With practice, you can train your ears to any accent. Then I ask, so what can I do to understand the Scottish accent? I don't live in Scotland. Our teacher says, you can watch films with Scottish English, or you can watch situation comedies from Scotland, and soon you can understand. I tell her, thank you. After school, I go to my work again. At about 4 o'clock, 2 interesting customers come to our cafe. This time, they are not from Scotland. They are foreigners. They want to buy some coffee. They are 2 ladies, and it is clear that their English is very basic. My boss is serving them. When she hears that they don't speak English very well, she does something very interesting. She changes her English. She uses very simple sentences with only 3 or 4 words. I can see that the ladies understand her. They buy 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, and 2 cakes. They are happy, and my boss is happy too. When the ladies leave, I tell my boss that it was very nice how she changed her English so that the two ladies would understand her. My boss says that sometimes she has to speak in a very simple English. It doesn't matter if the customers speak English well or not. They are our customers, and we have to do everything possible to make them feel comfortable. If they see that they can speak English here, they can come to our cafe every day. I think that our boss is a good businesswoman. She does everything possible to make our customers happy. It is true that we have a lot of customers. Our cafe is busy every day. When you want to understand people with a special accent, listen to audio with their accent for some time. What you can do at your level the next day at school. I tell my teacher about my experience with my boss and the two ladies who didn't speak English very well. Our teacher says, "Great, your boss must be a very clever young lady. It is true that you can communicate with everybody. Even people who speak English very well can have a conversation with those who are just at the beginning of their journey." Today we will speak about different levels of English and what you should be able to do at these levels. Let's start with the lowest level of 1,000 words. At this level, students can speak about some basic things from everyday life. The speaking is very limited, but it is already possible to communicate slowly for a short time with people who want to speak with you. Your sentences are short. They have usually 4 words. If the others also speak in short sentences, you can have a basic conversation. When students move to a higher level, which is 2,000 words, the conversations are easier and the sentences are longer. This is the level most of you in this class are at right now. You should be able to speak about many things from your life. You can speak about your family, hobbies, job, and traveling. Sometimes you may have a problem when you want to go into a deeper conversation on certain topics. However, this level is usually sufficient enough for everyday use of English. If you want to be able to have a deeper conversation on many topics, it is good to know 3,000 words. Your goal, as a student of English who wants to be able to speak English well, should be to learn 3,000 words. Of course, you can learn more than 3,000 words. The more words you know, the easier it will be for you to communicate in English. But 3,000 words is the level that is usually enough for communicating in English about almost everything. I think that the two ladies at your cafe knew about 1,000 words. Your boss went to their level, and she had a basic conversation. She speaks with the man, and she sells him 2 coffees and 2 of our regular sandwiches. I am surprised. When they leave, I go to my boss, and I tell her that I am sorry I didn't understand the man. She says that it is okay with them. After my school, I go to my work. The two ladies come to our cafe again. They also bring 2 of their friends. It is my turn to serve them. I speak to them in simple, short sentences. They understand me. This is great. They tell me that they are tourists from Japan. They tell me that they like our cafe because people understand them here. When you want to be able to communicate in English, learn 3,000 words. What to do when you are shy. On Thursday, I go to school again. One student has a very interesting question. She says, "I am very shy when I have to speak English. Can you help me to overcome my shyness?" Our teacher says, "It is true that when we use foreign languages, It is natural that we feel uncertain or shy. We are doing something that we are not perfect at. The possibility of making a mistake is great. I was also very shy when I learned foreign languages. I remember well how I was afraid to make a mistake. When I did make a mistake, I felt stupid, and sometimes I blushed. Now it is different. I use languages for communication. I care only about communication. You know that I am learning Spanish these days. Embarrassing situations can happen, but they can't stop me from using Spanish. It is true that sometimes I still feel shy when I have to speak Spanish. I also sometimes blush, but I don't care much about it. It is a natural human feeling, and it never lasts forever. I continue using Spanish because I know that only by using it I can improve. I also try to see things as they are. I am a student, and I am on the way to good Spanish. It is not possible to skip several levels in one day. The beginner can't become a perfect speaker in 1 hour. I also see what I mean to people around me. When I already speak some Spanish, I have a value to people who speak Spanish. You should see the same. When you already speak some English, you can have a conversation with other people in English. That's great. Look at what you already know. You know 2,000 words. You have already gone from 0 to 2,000 words. Appreciate it. Some students have a feeling that to know English means to be able to speak like a native speaker, to have perfect pronunciation, perfect grammar, and just speak perfectly without any mistakes. They think that if they are not doing that, then they don't know English. They are embarrassed because they are not perfect. These students are very hard on themselves. It is not necessary. All of you are great because you already speak some English. Continue working on your English, and your shyness can gradually go away. I like what our teacher tells us. I am also sometimes shy. I know that I should practice speaking a lot, but in some situations, I don't want to look stupid, and I don't speak as much as I should. I decide to be a bit more brave in these situations and use them to practice more. Then one student says, "Sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know the word which I want to say. Then I stop and I don't know what to do. In these situations, I feel very stupid. Then the next time when I can speak English, I don't want to speak because I don't want to be in this stupid situation again. Can you help me with this?" Our teacher says, "When you start to speak English, you have to prepare for one thing. There will be moments when you don't know a word which you want to say. In such a situation, you will need to learn how to describe the word." This ability is very important when learning a new language. Since you are not a native English speaker, you will probably never know the same amount of words as you know in your native language. I can tell you that you can describe almost every word. You only need to train this skill. You will have to train how to express ideas within the vocabulary you have. For example, you don't know how to say the word key. You can describe it as a small thing for opening a door. You also describe words in your native language without realizing it. If you don't know the word for something, you just describe it to the other person so that they understand what it is. You can do the same thing in English, but you need to train this ability. Thinking aloud is a very good technique to use when you want to be able to describe well. Use thinking aloud every day, and your ability to describe things will improve. You can learn English only when you use English. It is okay to be shy, but it can't stop you from using English.